Hey everyone, Lynn Fairchild-Hawkes here. Welcome to Identifying Skill Objectives, the Why for eStudies 2016. This brief presentation is going to set you up to complete your first deliverable, which is the skill objectives for your course. So, you studied Sakai and you know the goals of your course. And you see this arrow here on the screen where I'm pointing to the goal section in Sakai. You've probably, if you haven't written those goals yourself, you are probably someone who's studied them by this point and know generally what the content and skill objectives are. And now you're looking at your contract and you're saying, okay, I have to identify clear skill objectives that scaffold through week 7. So what does that mean? So you may have looked at the rubrics and maybe you saw some information there and thought, okay, I think I know what that means. But what do they mean here by clear? And what exactly are skill objectives? And what do you mean by scaffold? Well, what it's about is the macro and the micro. What we want to know is the relationship between your skills. We want to know what's most important, in what order, and what's the hierarchy. Because your skills are not just a grocery list. You're going to be actually intentionally selecting them and breaking them into micro skills. Like Russian dolls, these skills are going to be within each other and build on one another. For example, let's take a look at something for a science class. Let's say your macro skill is design a study to investigate causes of illness outbreaks at the state fair. That's a pretty big thing to do, designing a study. Well, what's a micro skill that's embedded in that? Distinguishing between independent and dependent variables. If a student doesn't know those important terms and the definitions and can distinguish between them, if they can't distinguish between them, then they won't be able to design that study. So this is just one of many micro skills that's buried in the larger macro skill. So that's the question you're asking yourself during this task. What are the levels of skill that are required in your course? Just think about if you have students write a lab report, doing academically honest research, if they're having any kind of argument with appropriate claims and reasoning. What does that involve? Obviously, you can't do one without another, and they're all buried within a larger skill. So the rigor you're looking for is a continuum of skills that can challenge our heterogeneous gifted population. All of our kids need to be able to do new things by the end of the eStudies term and take one particular macro skill to a new level. So what are the levels of skill required in your course? Now, what skills are really about is doing real-world work. Think about the real-world tasks of your discipline. What types of tasks will students do by the end of your course that real-world people do? And this is something that all of you are thinking about, otherwise you wouldn't be teaching a class like eStudies. And in particular, when you talk about Bloom's taxonomy, which is the taxonomy of thinking skills, the most challenging skills are at the top of the stairs: analyzing, evaluating, and creating or synthesizing. Skills are also really about success criteria, and you know where success criteria end up? On rubrics. So first you plan your skill objectives, and then those same objectives show up on the rubrics as success criteria, what you use to judge your students' products and performances. That's telling your students what quality looks like in your class. Each week of eStudies, your students should be able to look at that week in the term, know what a core assignment is, and see that success criteria on a rubric, whether it's a very small rubric or a large one. So this is the task you're headed for in preterm, and we're scaffolding this out for you. Right now, this winter, you're identifying your macro and your micro skills. Then your next step is you're going to create some assessments. You're going to begin with the end in mind and do what's called backwards planning. You're going to create your summative, which is your biggest assessments, where students can't really redo them for a new grade, and formative assessments, lower stakes practice assessments, all that build into the summative. All of these are going to require some demonstration of some of your skills. So that's for winter. And then by the spring, you will be building rubrics that reflect those skills. We're doing that last step of success criteria because we figure by the spring, after you've done some rough drafts of what you think that your rubrics will be, you can really finalize them. And in the meantime, we're going to be building some rubrics for you that you can totally reuse and repurpose throughout the winter and spring. And then finally, you're going to grade in Canvas using the really neat Canvas gradebook. And that's over the summer. Let's take a look at what that's going to look like. Do you see where the orange arrow is pointing towards learning outcome? Well, that's synonymous with skill objectives or success criteria. That's just the language that Canvas uses. So imagine that whatever the learning outcomes are for your, let's say, your writing prompt, your discussion, your quiz, a particular assignment, you're going to be able to see color-coded whether your student exceeds, meets, is near mastery, or well below mastery. You'll actually see that played out. Those skill objectives and criteria that you've planned are going to pay off in this way. So let's take just a moment to say, well, why is it that we don't do these things a lot of times in our planning? And that's due often to common misunderstandings. Sometimes we're so book-driven or content-driven, we have a big book that's attached to the course and we figure like, well, gosh, I better use every single page. And we spend more time parceling out content than thinking about what kids are going to be able to do by the end of the term. We worry about how much they're going to be able to know. But the key thing is, what are they going to be able to do by the end of the term? You're also going to build massive rubrics, you think, or you've built them and you say, my gosh, I got to reuse them. These are checklists. I've done all this hard work. I can't leave these hidden on a shelf. Well, the other thing that you probably worry about or think is, hey, kids have already done these tasks before. They'll just know what I mean. And I don't have a lot of time now. The rubrics are just so darn big. I'll worry about it later. I'll figure it out, in fact, when I'm grading. But actually, you don't have to use every single page, just enough. Rubrics can be chunked, and the biggest versions can show up in your final weeks of the course. And also, you probably already know this, but students don't know what we want till we tell them our learning intentions or goals. We tell them our success criteria, and we offer models and samples of quality work. That's why figuring out your skill objectives, which will become your success criteria, is so crucial now. So, little rubrics with very few skills on them are possible right now. And if you make the time now, you're going to find your grading will be incredibly efficient this summer. First of all, because you'll know what and why you're assigning something. There will not be any wasted assignments. Your students will know and your parents will know. You can also build examples and models, and students will create works that's better because you've done that. And then your grading, of course, will be faster and more efficient. And also, because you know all the layers of skills, you can better differentiate for those different layers of skill that your students actually bring to the course. So, as you get started, here's some things to consider. Do you already know the relationship among the skills you teach in your course, or is it still kind of a grocery list? Which ones are macro? Which are micro? What's the best order for learning? How might you consolidate some? Could you raise some to a higher level because they truly are the macro ones? Could you subordinate others? And how much time is it going to take your gifted kids to explore these in depth? So knowing the heterogeneity of your gifted students is crucial. You know those layers. So start thinking about that. Just a couple other thoughts. Less is more for 2016 because we're moving houses, so you'll be thinking, what is truly necessary? It's okay to only have maybe 3 macro skills for a 7-week term because you know the macro skill is going to hide several other skills. Things to think about. If your first assignment in week 1 has several criteria on it, you may want to chunk it. You may have too many skills too early. Likewise, if you've inherited a course where the first assignment has no rubric, then you can get started thinking about what are the skills for assessing this task. So what's great about eStudies, we have this incredible luxury. We don't have transcript requirements, state or national standards you have to meet. We don't have to rush through skills and be on pace by week 3. Those are all our self-imposed standards. So we can slow things down and we can say, you know what, and as far as what kids will know by the end of the term in terms of content, let's learn it just in time instead of just in case. So really reducing the number of content objectives is something you can do because you're going to talk about those later. Right now, we're focusing on what kids will be able to do by the end of the term. And of course, rigor can be based on that macro versus micro understanding, which allows us to challenge all of our kids at their level. So here's your task. You're going to select 3 to 4 macro skills that students will show mastery of by the end of the term. And as you select these, reduce the numbers of skills you will teach while thinking critically about the many micro skills already embedded in those macro ones. We're here to help. Contact an academic coordinator for support. If you have questions about the professional development or just general contract deliverables, don't hesitate to contact me. And of course, Jamie's here to support you with instructional design and technology as well. Thanks for listening.